assume is the master of ceremonies on this call, I am actually individually set up. So I've got a mic, I've got a camera, and then I've got my partner over here, Talaren, partner in crime, I should say, Talaren, helping run the audio end. So he'll be able to answer chat questions as well as basically hear anyone say anything, because I'm kind of on an island over here. So with that, is there anything we need from the Master of Ceremonies?
I'm going to go ahead and present a slide so that for the recording we have easy access to tell which class we are, and we are ready to begin. This is the Campfire Chef by Vater, and he has a nifty setup, and I'm excited to see everything he has to teach us today. And go ahead and take it away.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Vater. I am a veteran of this sport for going on like 5 or 6 years now. Up until about last year, I had been just doing Wolfpack Opener up in Bloomington Normal. And then in 2020, I decided it was going to be the year of change. I was going to show up to more of the Numenor events, start fighting with them. And then this thing called COVID ended up happening, and that made it a little bit difficult. But there was still spirit that remained. There were still fun things to do, even in a COVID time frame, things like going camping. And I realized as I was going camping that I do have a lot of finesse in cooking, both from my time just cooking in the kitchen and also going through things like Boy Scouts. So I have decided to start doing cooking at campouts, and I wanted to share some of what I've learned with the rest of you so you can basically be the best campsite chef you can be and more or less show off to the other campsites. So with that, I'm going to get started with what I like to call the importance or the what's in it for me, or most importantly for you. So why are you here? Well, I assume it's because you want to be the best campsite cook you can be. And that, excuse me, I'm taking my watch off. It was tapping on the table too much. That's my goal, is to help you do that. Now, I'm going to be showing a lot of different tools, pieces of equipment, some of which you may have, you may not have. Some of them may feel a little bit out of a price range. Let's face it, 70, 80 bucks for a cast iron pot is pretty steep, but at the same time, it's something that can be saved up for or potentially split among, say, a unit or a realm, and hopefully help lead to a really cool camping culture at your realm or unit level. I'm a big proponent for good cooking because I think good cooking brings people together. It makes a camp a lot more memorable. You know, if everyone has, say, hot dogs or soup at their site, it's not to downplay the importance of a good hot dog or soup, but it certainly helps whenever you can have something memorable, like, say, some of the recipes we're going to talk about, like how to do really good brats or breakfast items. We're going to talk about things like baked potatoes, pineapple upside down cake, various drinks, and various snacks as well. So with that, we're going to move into various supplies. So camping and cooking, you want to have your supplies for it. You're not going to have your full kitchen like you'd expect whenever you're at home cooking. And a big reason for that is, well, let's face it, you can only carry out so much. In the case of some of the camping we've done, it's as easy as just driving your car up and taking stuff out of your car. Other times it's been you're carrying everything on your back to your campsite of about 30 minutes of hiking and like 50 pounds worth of gear. Not necessarily ideal, but you can adapt to the different circumstances. Most of the stuff I'm going to talk about is assuming that we're doing an event such as Ockfest or Chaos Wars 24.0 or Armageddon, other type of events where you're able to get your equipment to your campsite a little bit easier. And that's going to lead us into, well, the basics. The first most basic item I want to talk about when you're doing campsite cooking is the Dutch oven. So what I have here, and I'm going to carefully move and not scrape up my table, is a basic Dutch oven. Now, To those unfamiliar with a Dutch oven, the principle is fairly simple. It is just a large cast iron pot, but what makes it an oven is the ability to put coals both underneath it and on top of it and allow for airflow so that you can actually keep those coals burning. That's why it's got these little legs at the bottom and why it's also got this indentation on the top. It allows for coals to sit on there and hopefully not drip ash into your pot as you're lifting and moving the lid. Now, something you may notice I did there was lifted the lid, and when I did that, I used my hands, and that's not something you're going to have the luxury of doing when this thing is up and running and actually hot with coals on top of it. So the next thing that I recommend is a multi-purpose trivet and pot lifter, one of these. So what this allows you to do is scoop up the pot lid and pick it up in such a way that it's not going all wobbly all over the place. If you were to pick it up with just any old hook and maybe one of the sides was unbalanced, it could cause it to tip, and then you drop ash or charcoal in your delicious dinner. And while that is a great source of, I don't know, carbon and maybe some micronutrients, it kind of ruins the whole flavor of things like, cobbler. So I tend to avoid trying to spill ash and whatnot into my meal. The other reason that I like these trivet is because you can actually use it to cook with other items. So you can set it up to put a pot on top of it. You can use it inside of the skillet, or I'm sorry, the pot here, if you're setting in an item and you wanted to raise it off the floor, for example. Though I will admit, I usually just use rocks for that, or maybe some spoons or something. There's a fun little trick with this. You don't ever want to set your pan with food directly on the bottom if it can be avoided. Now, things like biscuits, that's a little bit different. The biscuits, you don't mind a little bit of color on them. Things like soup, same deal. But something that has more of a potential to burn, like, say, pineapple upside down cake, we do want to protect that and lift it off the bottom so it doesn't get that direct heat. Now, the other reason I really recommend this type of pot, this is a Lodge, and mine in particular is a 12 quart. They come in a wide variety of sizes. It's because the top is really multi-dimensional. So we can use it as just the lid, and you can use it as the oven function. We can cook cake in here. We could cook bread in here. We could cook soup. We could cook, the sky's the limit with this thing, really. I hope I didn't turn this off. Okay, I didn't. But it can also be flipped upside down, and we've got this little concave center here. And what that allows us to do is use our multi-purpose trivet, set that up. We could have coals underneath it, and viola. We now have a crude approximation of a skillet. So we could set things like oil in there and fry eggs. We could do bacon. If you really want to be fancy, you could do like Jack Daniel's bacon. Chimera taught me that one. Or you can do a multitude of other things. Just cook toast on it, whatever you end up wanting. So with that, just 3 simple utilities, we've got a really wide berth of stuff that we can start cooking at the campsite. Now, I am going to throw in another set of cast iron that I really recommend, and that's another thing of Lodge. I promise I'm not sponsored by them. They just happen to have the best quality / affordability rating. And that's one of these. It is a pot and a skillet combo. So it can work as a pot, it can work as a shallow skillet, and as a deep skillet. It's absolutely amazing if you want to do things like frying or boiling or cooking, and you don't want to have to take up your ability to use this as an oven to, say, cook bread. You can cook rice in here. You can flip it open and do things like gravy on one side, eggs and bacon on the other, pancakes, French toast, whatever you want for breakfast. You can do steaks, and you can do I don't know, mashed potatoes or something to go with the steaks. Like, again, it opens up a lot of possibilities. The other thing is, it is cheaper than a Dutch oven. So if you were on the side of wanting to get something similar to a Dutch oven with a little bit more flexibility at an easier price point, one of these fancy things that I don't actually remember the name for is going to be your way to go. I prefer having both of those with me whenever I go camping. So Lauren can speak to that. When we did a camp out before, I used both of these pretty much exclusively for a lot of the cooking, with one other notable exception. And that is, as I step off camera here to my magic box, these. So these are cast iron griddles or grates, not technically griddles, but they're the types of things that you see inside of grills for doing like hot dogs or brats or whatever. And I also highly recommend something like these. Now, you can buy these, or you can do what I did and notice your neighbor was throwing away a propane grill that happened to have 4 of these things sitting inside of them. Ask your neighbor if you can take those, and they say, sure, that's fine. And then you take them, and then you find out that the trash company doesn't actually pick up the propane grill. So they kind of were awkward about can I have those back? And I said, yeah, sure. But I got a second set of them. So we're all good. I highly recommend these too because it's really easy to set up over your campfire and have a grilling surface for, again, things like steak, chicken, hot dogs, brats, whatever it is. A lot of campsites do come with this kind of stuff pre-installed, but I know when you go to a lot more of those wildernessy ones without designated campsites, you start to lose the ability to find a good griddle or grill type surface. So another thing I recommend, and again, you can pillage those from the free grills that you see on the side of the road the day before trash pickup. So 10 out of 10, highly recommend. Now, excuse me as I open my list back up here. We've gone over the cast iron cookware. The next stuff I'm going to get into is kind of the portable, typical kitchen utensils you may want to bring along with you. And that's where I'm going to bring my whole magic box on screen this time. And I'm going to pull some of the stuff out of here and explain it. So this vegetable roasting tray. I keep this in my little pack as well because it's super easy to set things like veggies or giant rolls of pork that we're going to use to make tacos with, or whatever else I want. Set them on here, plop them over the fire. Makes it really easy, especially to take that off, set it on a table, and then serve it later on. That I found at Goodwill for like $1. Can't recommend Goodwill or thrift stores enough to be able to find some of these camping supplies. And if you're really lucky, sometimes you find a cast iron skillet. Other things. If you feel like being environmentally conscious, and we can fight about what that means necessarily, but you might get yourself a set of like plastic and aluminum dishware you can reuse, or you can just use paper ones and throw them away or burn them in the campfire. Whatever you end up doing. I like these just because they're a little bit more robust, and we're able to accommodate them at a campsite a little bit better. But again, y'all can do whatever you want as far as campsite eatery goes. I got these from Menards for I think like 15 or 20 bucks. So pretty swell deal in my mind. Other things, just a simple tray. Like a simple tray can come in so handy for, again, just setting out food, whether that be like if you're doing taco night or fajita night, you can just throw everything in a pan. Ooh, bent on me. You can throw everything in a pan and it's just easy to slide on and off of a table. Something you kind of forget when you're out camping is the convenience of just immediate movable surface area. Other things, extra little trays to say cook your like pineapple upside down cake in, or whatever you end up making, or again, putting food items in. Heat-proof gloves. Now, there are a couple varieties of these. I happen to have the welding variety because they look cool and I thought they worked really well. And then it turns out they kind of trap moisture. So when you're cooking a lot and sweating in them, they end up feeling wet and building up heat and maybe causing yourself to burn a little bit. So they also make these ones. I think these are rated to like several hundred, if not 1,000 degrees. They've got a little grippy surface on them too. So you're supposed to be able to grip your utensils or whatnot a little bit easier. Again, another Menards find, highly recommended. Just something so that way you can, if necessary, grab this hot cast iron or whatever and move it without having to, say, use a stick or a couple shovels and accidentally spill all your soup like I did one time when I was in Boy Scouts. There are a lot of good lessons to learn the hard way. And the best way to learn a lesson is to learn it by somebody else screwing it up. So don't screw it up like I did. Definitely have good heat-proof gloves available. Other things, aluminum foil. Super easy to either make foil packs with or to cover pots with if you have multiple things out. Keep flies away from your food, or exchange precious metals, wrap a piece of wood in it and say it's a coin. Your imagination is your limit. You can also find aluminum cookware that you can use around the campfire. as much of an advocate as I am for cast iron, just because it's so robust, let's face it, I found this stuff at a little auction, like one of those, someone's moving, just auctioning all their stuff off. And this was with a bunch of other stuff that cost $5. So really good investment if you can find it.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Do basic hot pads work for cast iron?
So yes and no. Let me give you a caution on hot pads, because I use those in my own home kitchen and I've used them on the campouts. If your hot pad gets wet, it's not going to be as effective. And the reason I say that is things like aluminum have very low heat capacity. So while it's hot, it loses that heat very quickly in things like touch. So don't go grabbing, say, a hot aluminum pan with your hands. You'll find out why the hard way. But if you grab it with just a regular piece of fabric, like the kitchen hot pads, it will work, but it can heat up really quickly, especially if you've been around a fire, you're sweating, maybe it got rained on, whatever. Admittedly, you heard me say the same thing happened with leather. That's why I did end up getting these, because I haven't had as much of an issue with these, just because they're like double leveled and they don't seem to retain water quite as well. But basically, if you keep your stuff dry, yes, it will work. Just you'll figure out really quickly how long you can stand to hold on to hot cast iron with a couple layers of fabric in between. That answer the question? I'll assume yes and move on. Sweet. Other things I've got inside of my magic little box, a can opener. All right. It doesn't have to be this fancy, pinchy one. I used to have one of those punch ones somewhere. Let's face it, you can open a can with a rock or a pocket knife if you're desperate enough. And you want to assume that everyone's going to bring cans with a pop top or have a can opener in it. But if someone forgot the can opener, it's nice to just have it inside of your kitchen box, and more importantly, a dedicated can opener. Don't steal the one from your house, because one day your wife may go looking for it and she's going to pull it out of your box, and you're not going to realize that. And you're going to go camping and you're going to go, where's my can opener? And then you got to open your soup with a rock. It works. It's just not as fun. So I got this at Goodwill for like 50 cents. What else we got inside this box? Spices. Now, I know you'd think spices would be obvious, but it's super easy to forget some of the basics. My recommendation for spices is one typical little hot sauce. It's going to give you some spice and it's going to give you some vinegar flavor. Those two things alone can just amplify a dish. I mean, that's why in like the old MREs, you'd find the little things of the Tabasco sauce, which, by the way, those are so cute. I love those and I miss those. Next up, I've got just what I'd call less basic hot sauce, the kind of stuff you'd find at the table at your local Mexican restaurant. That's going to add a lot of heat without adding a lot of vinegar. I mainly had this in there because I made tacos al pastor at the last camp out, and I just kind of like to keep it in there because there are some people who are very addicted to heat. I am not one of them, but it is a nice way to be welcoming in your environment. And also, you never know who's going to come by your campsite and offer to trade something incredibly valuable for just a couple drops of hot sauce. I've got basic table salt. Seems simple enough, but I mean, again, salt, it adds to just any dish. Same thing here. I got pepper. I've also got little packs of soy sauce. Now, I'm not usually making any Asian dishes out there, but soy sauce can still add a lot of depth and variety to just simple meat dishes or soups, or even if you're doing like a brat boil, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. I've also got one of these 4-chamber spice things. I got this at Aldi. I'm also a huge advocate for Aldi, anything to save money. And I've got 3 or 4 different varieties in here. I've got my spicy allspice, which is a custom blend. I've got my Zora spice, which, oh yeah, I should note, my spicy allspice is technically called Goron spice, based off Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild. The Zora spice is a white spice that goes really good on things like fish and chicken. There's my steak spice, which goes really good on steaks. And there's my autumn mix, which is things like basically pumpkin spice. It goes really good on stuff like apples, cobbler, pies, drinks. It's just a nice way to add a little bit of a seasonal touch to whatever you're making. That's about all I've got for spices. I do also like to keep some Crisco around because you can season your cast iron with it should you need to do that. It also just helps loosen things up or maybe add to your biscuits if you're just using Bisquick. And this one is I'm going to call it trade secret. I like to keep tomato sauce in my kitchen bags at all times. I'm not usually using it for stuff, but in a pinch, you can basically turn anything you've got into something else just using tomato sauce. So another staple that I usually have in here that I don't, because this was in my sunroom for several months, is tortillas. So if you've got tortillas and you've got tomato sauce, you've got the ability to make really good thin crust pizzas because you've got your carbs in the tortilla. You've got your tomato sauce to become, well, the pizza sauce. You've got spices to make it, well, better than just lame tomato sauce. And let's say you got brats. Cut those open, cook them up, boom, you've got yourself some sausage. Let's say you've got eggs. Well, you can make one of those fancy, weird pizzas that people like to put eggs on. I'm not judging you if you like eggs on your pizza. I've never done it. I'm sure it's great. The same reason I don't put peanut butter on my hamburgers. I'm sure it's good. I'll find out one day. Other items, like if you just got ground beef, again, spice that up and boom, you've got something else to just make pizza out of. And you may even have cheese with you. So if you like your breakfast omelets with cheese, you've got ingredients to make a pizza. You can use this to make chili. You can just eat it straight out of the can if you're super desperate. You can mix it with milk and you can make tomato soup. It's just incredibly versatile. Unfortunately, this one does not have the little pop top on it. So again, I'm going back to why a can opener is super important. Other small things, rags. This is actually cheesecloth, so I can use it for straining if I need to. I can cut pieces off of it and use it for seasoning cast iron. I can use it to grab the top if I'm really desperate and forgot my mittens. You can use it to clean surfaces. You can cut pieces off and use it as like a bleach rag. Oh yeah, that's one of the things that's not in my bag that I also need to talk about. They're actually all set up in my kitchen right now, but it's a little thing of soap, a little thing of baking soda, and a little thing of bleach, and then a little thing of apple cider vinegar. Now, those 4 things will clean just about anything. You can clean, you can sanitize, you can wage chemical warfare if you're really desperate. I don't recommend doing that. Please do not mix apple cider vinegar and bleach. But, wait, is that ammonia? I think that's bleach. Okay, ammonia and bleach. Okay, I don't carry ammonia. Never mind. Still don't want to mix those, I imagine. Acid and bases, either way. Those 4 things, apple cider vinegar is going to help clean surfaces. Also, you can use it to cook with. Bleach, going to clean surfaces. And worst case scenario, you can add some of it to water and help purify your drinking water. You know, you'll need to look up the ratios. Please don't just go dumping a whole bunch of bleach in water and think that that's going to make it drinkable. The baking soda is going to be really good for helping scrub surfaces. You could also use it in a pinch for cooking. And dish soap, well, it's good for pretty much dish soap and I guess blowing bubbles if you're really out of things to do at the campsite.
We have a question.
Yes.
What is cheesecloth and where do you get it?
Great question. Okay, so cheesecloth is traditionally used in cheese making, hence the name. It is a very, I guess, open type of cloth. I want you to imagine the stuff that you see on mummy costumes. That's basically what this is. That's another great thing for this. You can use it as a bandage. So you saw that just a little bit of it there. I can open this up, and now I've got something that I can make a tourniquet out of. I can make a sling out of. I could make whatever I really need to out of this. I could make a really bad blanket or a really cool headscarf. But you can use it for cleaning. You can use it for straining. So I actually use this a lot when I make chai tea. I do loose leaf and a whole bunch of spices along with like milk and cook it, whatever. And then when it's time to strain it, because I've got large pieces of whole spice in there, I'll fold this over 1 or 2 times and then strain my chai tea through it. And it pulls out most of the solids. Whatever's left is like the small stuff that I don't mind inside of my tea. Gives it a little bit of texture. So you can use it as a coffee filter in a pinch. You can use it as a tea bag in a pinch. And again, it's just a multi-purpose, very lightweight. As far as where to buy it, I don't support sending Jeff Bezos into outer space. You can buy it on Amazon. You can also buy it at Ace Hardware. You can probably find it at Walmart. You can actually, I even think my local Schnucks carries it now that I'm thinking about it. So you can find it at most grocery stores. It's usually over in the baking aisle around things like baking pans and flour. It's highly versatile in a camp bag and also in the kitchen. So I highly recommend it. Last couple things I want to hit on. Kitchen knives, because they're great, and I have these Cuisinart ones. I guess I should say they're only okay, but they come with these plastic covers, which is great because you don't want a bunch of loose knives sitting in your box that someone's going to go digging through because they might get a cut. And if you're like me, I hate cuts. And if you're also like me, you cut yourself right before the video, and it was on a can. Oops. Lastly, chopsticks. Why? Why do you carry chopsticks? You said you don't make Asian cuisine. I typically don't, but I do a lot at home, and I have tons of chopsticks at home for that reason. You can use these as basically emergency utensils. Like, they're the most versatile type of eating utensil you can get. You just have to cut your stuff up into smaller portions. But how do you eat soup with chopsticks? Well, easy. You drink the soup and then scoop the solids into your mouth or pick them up one by one. But how do you eat tomato soup without with chopsticks? Again, drink the soup from a mug. I highly recommend that. You can also use them as like camp utensils. They're wood, so you can set them on fire if you're, I don't know, needing to build a fire with some easy kindling that's already going to be dry because it's in your cooking box. And yeah, this is like half of them out of my box, so I do like to just keep chopsticks in here. That pretty much covers the basics of all the cooking stuff that I would have inside of my cooking box. And it's the stuff that I recommend having. Now, again, do you need a full aluminum cook set along with your cast iron? Absolutely not, but you'll figure your way. If you're like me, you'll bring way too much on your first camp out after a while, and you'll start learning how to kind of pare things down from there. So that is going to bring us into the next section, which is going to be talking about some of these recipes. Now, what I haven't done is prepared a bunch of food to show you live examples of me making it. And the reason for that is because it's a lot of food that I don't necessarily want to make and then not promptly eat. But I am going to do what I think is a pretty darn good job of explaining the basics of some of that, as well as doing some close to live demonstrations with what I've got here in front of me. So excuse me as I move my magical cook box one last time. And we're going to talk about some of the different varieties of food that you can make in a given day. Oh yeah, one more thing. And it's actually in my bag, and I'm not going to go grab it. I'm about to hike the Appalachian Trail in a couple weeks, and that reminded me that you can get those little stove systems. They have like isobutane fuel and a little screw on top, and then maybe it comes like with an actual attached cup or something that you can do boiling of water in and then cooking with. If you're doing solo camping or kind of on your own at a camp out, I highly recommend those. Another option is Coleman stoves. So I always forget about Coleman stoves because I love them, yet every time I use them, they seem not to work. And some of that has to do with temperature. Some of it has to do with windy conditions. And I know they have the windscreens built in. And before I get too far into Coleman stoves, let me just explain. Those are the big green stoves you may see people pull out at campsites. They kind of, I don't know how to describe it other than like a laptop. It's got a little top that opens up, these little wings that come out, and usually it's got 2 burners and a big red fuel tank. While those are fantastic, they also keep you away from heat and are technically a lot more comfortable to cook by. I personally like cooking around a campfire. Now, does that mean whenever I'm cooking for like 30 or 40 people, you won't see me using one? Oh, you will absolutely see me crack that thing out because the odds have it I'm not going to be cooking in like sub-freezing weather with that thing. Worst case scenario, if it was sub-freezing, I'd cook closer to the campfire to keep that fuel warm. But I do want to make sure that you're aware of those as well. So this brings us into general recipes. So first thing I want to touch on is Dutch oven practices. So if you are cooking with one of these, a couple things I recommend. First of all, bringing some coal with you, or charcoal. If you want to bring regular coal, go for it. It'll make your food taste funny, guaranteed. So charcoal briquettes are the best. Lump charcoal works as well. You can just use charcoal straight out of your fire too if you've got a bunch of wood that has burned down to that hot charcoal phase. However, when you're doing that, there's a couple cautions. One, making sure that you're spreading your coals out correctly. This isn't something I'm going to dwell on talking about here because if you are interested in cast iron cooking, there are tons of YouTube videos about that explain proper coal placement. There's also little like cards you can buy that have that information. Or if you're like me, you can just kind of wing it and hope for the best, and it most of the time works out. Another thing that I learned by burning is making sure that you keep your ash off the top of your cooking surface. So naturally, as you've probably all seen, when charcoal burns, it starts to gray and ash starts to fall. Ash, as it turns out, is an excellent insulator. So while your charcoal is nice and hot, it's not pushing that heat down into the surface of the lid and then allowing that heat to transfer into the pot. So as charcoal ash starts to build up, you need to remove it. Now, you can buy a fancy broom to do that. Or if you're like me, and I'm not the best role model when it comes to cooking, but something I like to do is just blow the ash off. Excuse me, I need a drink. You can blow the ash off. So when I do that, I usually close my eyes and just kind of, and it gets most of it off. I close my eyes because I know embers can come back and get me. Same thing with ash. That seems to do the trick. There's also rotations. You want to make sure that you're rotating your pot periodically as well as rotating the lid so that way you don't get hot spots. You can rotate that however much you want. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. I usually go for somewhere between the 5 to 10. It's basically just when I think, oh yeah, I should go rotate that. I go and rotate it. And it's usually by anywhere from 45 to 90 degrees. So that gets the super basics of the charcoal done. Let's say you are cooking breakfast on this. We'll imagine that we've got this nice little bed of charcoal underneath our pot here. There's several different items you can cook for breakfast. My favorite one to start off with is biscuits and gravy. And this is when I use my little two-piece system over here. But you can start by putting your biscuits directly inside of here. I'll make them fresh, usually with Bisquick, and then add a little bit of extra fat into it. You can just use the canned variety. You could use, say, cinnamon rolls instead of biscuits. Possibilities are virtually endless here, but put whatever you're cooking inside of the pot, put the lid on, put the charcoal on, the proper amount of it for the time and duration you want to cook, and you let it cook. And then say 30 minutes later, 45 minutes maybe, you come back by and Viola, you have fully cooked, ready to eat biscuits. Now, from there, you could, during that time, be cooking something else in your other pots, such as your gravy and your eggs. But if you want to keep it simple, you can do your biscuits in just this. Again, you'll want something to put underneath it, like that little multi-piece trivet that I misplaced. Oh, there it is. Or something to also put the charcoals on top. Oh, other quick hack for you. If, let's say, you did just want to get this little pot and pan piece over here, you can set this up similar to a cast iron skillet. You have your charcoal under here, but how are you going to get your heat on top? Yes, you can set charcoal on here. You do run the risk then of when you go to lift this and move it, ash falling in. So the way that we did it back in Boy Scouts, the one time that we forgot our cast iron skillet, guess whose job it was to remember the cast iron skillet? Or, I'm sorry, Dutch oven. What you do is then just get something like this or an aluminum plate or something, put your coal in there, and then set it directly on top. I do recommend adding a little bit of extra, and it is a lot harder to get the ash out, but it works in a pinch. Whatever the case. So you've cooked your biscuits. Then you could take your biscuits out, put them in a different little tray, cover in some aluminum foil, because let's face it, a hot biscuit's good, but when you're camping, it doesn't matter. It could be any temperature, so long as it's just not too soggy or too dry. You could then cook your gravy in here, and we could flip this over, cook some sausage in it, just as it is. Then you could cook your eggs in the leftover grease, and bam, you've got yourself a full course breakfast. Alternatively, while your biscuits are cooking inside of here, you could then cook your gravy inside of this, your eggs and sausage inside of this, and everything comes out close to the same time. That's typically what I end up doing, but again, I am blessed to have a dowry of cast iron that is not just limited to what you see in front of you, so I'm a little bit more flexible on that front. It also doesn't have to be cast iron. I've heard this question asked before too. Can I just use my basic aluminum cooking skillet from home? The answer is yes. Again, do I advise it? Stealing your single piece of cooking equipment from home that may end up being needed? Up to you. If you buy them from the store, great. The only thing that I caution you against is buying the stuff that's got the nonstick coating on it. And the reason is because at incredibly high temperatures, that will start to break down and fleck off. And there are health concerns about that, but I just wouldn't want that in my food personally. I don't know if it's like actually carcinogenic or anything. So that's another reason why if you're doing campfire cooking, this is recommended. If you're just doing it on a Coleman stove or some sort of propane thing, you're going to be able to control temperatures a lot better. So you're far less worried about that. Either who, back to breakfast items. So that covers the basics of your easy course breakfast items. Something else that I like to do inside of this cast iron skillet is bread pudding. So if you haven't heard of bread pudding before, it's a fairly easy way to use up stale bread. You just take your bread, you shred it, you add in various other fixings like eggs, butter, cream, spices. Some people use like, say, sour cream or yogurt or something. You mix it all up inside of a little pan like this. You set your trivets in there, your rocks, whatever. Pop it in, pop the lid on, cook it at, say, 350 degrees for 30 to 45 minutes. And you've got yourself a really easy come by and spoon it out dish. Again, you can find recipes for this stuff online. But that's another highly recommended breakfast item that you can easily cook in a cast iron pot. So breakfast is done. Everything's delicious. You're all going out to the battlefield. You're having a grand old time fighting, and you want to come back and eat a lunch. What I highly recommend for lunches using cast iron skillets or the like is something simple. Now, I know I was kind of poo-pooing on hot dogs and brats and soups. Those are really easy options for lunch. You can have it kind of heating while you're gone. You can boil your brats, you can boil your hot dogs. And before anybody starts yelling at me for boiling brats, I'll get to a good recipe here in a second. But it's really easy to come by, grab it from the pot, then have one of these bad boys sitting over your fire. You just give it a little color on each side on your brat, pop that baby in a bun. If you really feel fancy, add a little bit of butter and some seasoning to the bun, cook that over the fire too. Amazing. And then, boom, you're fed. The reason that I advocate for boiling brats with adequate amounts of beer and spices, if possible, especially dark beer, it works the best. If you boil it at like a simmering temperature, you're not going to lose a ton of the fat content of the brat. And it's going to be fully cooked all the way through, and then you just walk by and grab one when you want it. That means that it's fully cooked. You're not risking any foodborne illnesses from undercooked pork, and it allows a wider window of time. And again, it's so much quicker to just pop it out with your tongs. That's one of the things I forgot to mention. Always keep tongs in your thing. All my tongs are currently in my kitchen drawer. But I also have a bunch of tongs, so it doesn't hurt me to grab them. But grab them with your tongs, fry them up real quick, pop it in the bun. You're good to go. Other ones that I always advocate for, pork and beans. So if you're from the Illinois area, you've probably heard of like the Apple and Pork Festival. That's where I currently reside. So I do apple and pork every year with that. And I found it's a fairly easy campsite meal to make. Again, tons of recipes online, not going to dwell on it, but it's a very easy soup to just make in here, leave it set, stay warm. If you really want to spice it up, make some cornbread beforehand too. So either, again, if you're just using this one pot, make your cornbread first in one of these. Then you can take your cornbread, cover it in foil, whatever, leave it to the side, start making your soup. And then people can come by and grab cornbread and grab some soup whenever they need it. Very easy, very low impact, and again, super easy cleanup. Because let's face it, you want to maximize your time on the battlefield that day. Another couple easy ones, tortillas. You can use those to make those tortilla pizzas I talked about. Or if you got tortillas, make fajitas. And it sounds so easy, or almost oversimplified, but if you just have some like steak or chicken or something, some veggies, throw them all in the pot, cook them up with a little bit of seasoning, boom, you got fajitas. It's an easy come by, grab it, throw it in your tortilla, eat it, get back to the battlefield. Quick, easy calories, quick, easy cleanup, single pot solution. Finally, we're getting into our dinner portion here. Now, dinner, you can have a little bit more time for. Again, especially if you got someone who's willing to kind of sit at the campsite and do this stuff. First one I'm going to recommend, and this is something you'll want to look up, but there's single pot recipes for something called chicken biryani. Now, that's an Indian recipe. It is chicken thighs and basmati rice, as well as a bunch of spices. Do you have to go so fancy that you're using things like saffron and black cardamom? Absolutely not. You can make it bare bones, and it's still a really good and rewarding dish that's easy to come by, scoop something out of, and eat. Again, single pot. It's perfect. You can look up recipes for that. If you spell biryani wrong, I'm sure Google will correct you, or you'll just forget about it. On other ones, baked potatoes. So you can bake a whole bunch of potatoes inside of one of these, or you can use that handy aluminum foil out of a cooking box. Just wrap them in foil, toss them in the fire or near some hot coals, rotate them every once in a while, and then you get baked potatoes. And then you get the elitist who comes by your campsite and says, those are technically steamed potatoes. And you say, okay, well, you don't get any. Again, easy to throw something on those and make them delicious. You can have it as simple as salt and pepper, or you can throw on things like veggies, sour cream, butter, whatever you end up wanting. Going back with the foil idea there, if you keep around some things like sausages, brats, meats, veggies, stuff that you were going to use to make your fajitas anyway, then you just throw all that inside of a bunch of aluminum foil with some things like butter and spices, wrap it all up, toss that in the fire, and you get what's known as the hobo foil pack. I don't know if that's technically the term we should use these days, but ultimately it's a foil pack meal. Very easy to make, very delicious, and very filling after a long day. Cowboy steaks and kebabs are another good one. What's a cowboy steak, you probably wonder? Well, you can take the steak and just cook it directly on the coals. Now, before you freak out, we've done it before. Talaran, how were the cowboy steaks?
It's pretty damn good.
He said they were pretty damn good. So we've done it on a campsite. Yeah, you just take your steak, season it and whatever, straight on the coals. I know it sounds crazy. Then you flip it straight on some other hot coals. It cooks it. Yeah, you may have a little bit of charcoal. You have to... That's my guard dog. She's very sweet. So I know it sounds so like weird, but it is so good and it's so easy and it's so much stuff you don't have to clean up. Or you can just do kebabs. But blah, what if I forgot to bring little kebab sticks? Well, I pull out my chopsticks and just sharpen them up on the end a little bit more. They're technically shorter kebabs, but they're pretty easy to use. Lastly, we've got simple things like a pot roast. You got a whole pot here. You just follow your normal pot roast recipe and you're good to go. And rolls. You can actually make some pretty good dinner rolls in this thing. That's going to bring us into dinner. So the three ones I always advocate for is pineapple upside down cake. Most cast iron pots that you buy are going to come with pineapple upside down cake in them. There's also cinnamon rolls. You can just buy the little tubed ones, crack those open, set them in either your pan or directly in the pot, cook them, and boom, you've got something delicious. But the third one is cobbler. Now, I'm going to take a 30-second intermission, and I'm going to go and grab the hot cobbler that's been cooking this entire time and show you what some good cast iron hot cobbler can look like. So stand by. Thank you. Let's see how far you can hear me as I step outside to go grab it from the pot. Here I am opening my door. And here I am grabbing it. Oh, that looks fantastic. That couldn't have gone any better if I tried. All right. So, hi, I'm back, and I have fresh cobbler. Now, let's see if I can do this without spilling it all over the place. So, cobbler, so easy to make. And I'm going to run you through how I did that after I grab a plate and a spoon to show you just how well this turned out. So, while I'm doing that, let me tell you, cobbler, simple. I used 2 cans of peaches, and I used a little bit of Bisquick, and then the juices straight out of the peaches. And then, of course, in the cooking vessel that it was being made in. Somebody wants cobbler. So, I did put some spices on it. I used my little autumn spice mix. So, you've got yourself your hot cobbler here. Just grab yourself a big spoonful of it, and we're going to take a look at this. So we've got the delicious whole peaches just straight out of the can, super tender. We've got the peach juice that was mixed in with the Bisquick. We've got the seasoning on top of it. And, of course, you can see the steam coming off. Oh, it's going to be delicious. How do I know it's going to be delicious? Well, I'm going to hand it to Talaran, and we're going to make sure he doesn't die eating it. Careful, it's hot. The verdict is he's not allowed to say anything but good, so it's not like I'm expecting anything less. Ooh, he just did that like head nod with the brow furrow. So it sounds like it was pretty good. So super easy to do. And you can do it in this one dish. I used a bowl, admittedly, to kind of mix this up. So I put the peaches through a strainer, collected the juices in a bowl, then put the peaches directly into the pan, mixed in the Bisquick with the peach juice until it was about the consistency of pancake batter, dumped it on top. Some people who are crazier than I am will say to just put the Bisquick directly on top. I don't recommend doing that. It makes for a chunkier consistency. It's not quite as bready or cakey. So I recommend mixing it if possible. You can also just mix it all together in one little pan and then cook it in there. Or you can just cook it straight in the cast iron cookware as well. So again, I did a little bit fancy here, but nevertheless, you can see how delicious something can look just out of a cast iron Dutch oven. So last things I want to cover, snacks throughout the day. Snacks that I've made that are super easy. Grilled cheese or quesadillas. We've talked about the importance of having things like bread or tortillas. Just slap some cheese on there, and that's hot. I don't know what I did with my oven. Oh, wait, I have another one. Oh, wait, better yet, I can prove the efficacy of cheesecloth. I am unburned. So if I just use the top of this, it is really easy to make a quesadilla on. Just a little bit of butter, tortilla, some cheese, fold, bam, you're done. Same thing with grilled cheese. And of course, if you really want to be creative and get some soup, grab one of my cans of tomato sauce. Also, something I do called fried bread. Now, there's a couple ways you can do it. You can do it as simple as Bisquick. I like to do Bisquick, a little bit of yeast. So I just bring like some bagged yeast, the quick active rise stuff, and then some seasoning. I just use my steak seasoning. Mix that all together until it's about a bread dough, but slightly stickier consistency. Get some oil ready to the frying temperature. Just slap some of that in there with a spoon. Let it cook, flip it, and then you get yourself some delicious, salty, spicy, bread-like stuff that is incredibly amazing after you've been fighting all day. That's a quick thing that you can fry up and just have ready as a snack. Now, my last stuff I want to give you is my tips and tricks. So this is going to take a couple minutes, then I'm going to open the floor to any other questions. So since you've sat through with this long, I want to give you the biggest tips to success for making sure that you have successful camp out cooking. First one is planning a menu and communicating that with the group that you're going camping with. So making sure that you know how many people are coming, plan the correct amount of food accordingly, try not to bring too much extra, and try not to plan on too many like extra snacks or meals. Let's face it, lunch is almost a luxury whenever you're actually in an event. Maybe you're just like snacking on granola, or people want to handle their own lunches. We did kind of a joint breakfast and then a like group dinner, but I handled the dinners and the desserts. Breakfast and lunch were kind of sort of a free for all, though breakfast, usually someone else took charge and made like Pepsi lemon steaks. Is that what it was? Yeah, lemon Pepsi steaks. Amazing. Another thing I should have talked about, but I'll wait till Talarin does his own teaching class. Next one I've got for you is making sure that you look up helpful resources like online videos or recipes and checking them out ahead of time, and if possible, testing them. If you feel really comfortable with your ability to cook, then you can just improv this stuff when you're out in the field and at the campsite. I do recommend, if you're not, trying to test some of that ahead of time so you don't accidentally burn something or, potentially ruin a dinner that everyone was kind of looking forward to. It's pretty rough out there and camping. On the bright side, most places are near a pizza place or at least a Casey's. Estimate your cook time. Don't end up like me and forgetting how long it takes to cook a bunch of meat, and then dinner ends up being at like 9 o'clock. At least everyone was nice and hungry by the time it rolled around, but it did kind of suck being up that late trying to get stuff ready for dinner. So try to bide your time accordingly. And finally, this is the biggest secret. This is the one for success. This is the one I love using and haven't used in a while, but I look forward to it again. And that's pre-cooking everything ahead of time, or at least most of what you can ahead of time. So things we talked about, like tacos and fajitas, you can cook that stuff at home, throw it in an airtight like freezer bag, and then just keep it in your cooler. And when you're ready to use it, you can reheat it in the skillet real quick if you want by frying it. Or if you want to use a little bit more time and less effort, just add some water to this pot, get it hot, maybe to the point of boiling, maybe a little bit under that. Then just take your bag that's not going to melt inside of that excessive amount of heat and drop it straight in the pot and let it sit there for like 20 to 30 minutes. It will heat up to full temperature. You can pop it out. You can brown it again if you want, but then you can just eat it. Most of the stuff we talked about on here, I'm going to say excluding breakfast, unless you want to count pre-cooked biscuits or bacon, but the brats, you can cook those ahead of time. Pork and beans, you can cook it ahead of time. Tortilla pizzas, fajitas definitely. Dinner, things like baked potatoes, you can do that ahead of time. Foil packs, same deal. Steaks, I prefer my steaks fresh, but you do you. Pork chops, I mean, if you really want to get fancy, you can even sous vide stuff. If you don't know what that is, I highly recommend looking it up. It's cooking stuff in water in an airtight environment. I'm doing it right now with some Indian chicken that I'm making. Anywho, all these great ways to pre-cook stuff ahead of time so you're minimizing the time you both have to cook at the campsite and the dishes that you're going to dirty. It also means you have a little bit more control over the portions. And I can't stress this enough, food safety. Food safety while you're out camping is one of the bigger things. Don't get yourself sick eating undercooked brats. So if you can cook anything ahead of time, or at least give it the opportunity to cook in water, like with the whole brat thing, again, highly recommend that. Cook it in beer, dark beer preferably. You are going to be leagues ahead of most other campsites. Now, do you want to do that with everything? I don't imagine toast being pre-cooked would be that good. Spaghetti, it's questionable. It's also way heavier when you're bringing in a bunch of waterlogged food like spaghetti. But still, it's up to you guys. You'll experiment with it. Maybe you got some, hardy people who don't mind carrying in a bunch of coolers worth of spaghetti or cooked corn or whatever. But if you can pre-cook it, save yourself all that time and hassle. Well, that's it. That's all I got. With that, we got like 5 minutes left. 7 minutes left. What questions do we got? I'll wait for him to pour in.
I'll jump in. How do you store your food while camping? Do you just do ice in a cooler, or do you have other methods?
How do you store your food while camping? Do you use ice in a cooler, or are there any other recommended methods?
Great question. I prefer ice in a cooler. I prefer a good cooler too, if at all possible. I know, I've used just like the foam ones before. I have just like some cheap Meyer brand ones. If you can borrow a better cooler from maybe like a neighbor, your parents, a friend, whatever, the bigger the cooler, the more, capacity for ice, the better. And then recognizing that it's not going to keep stuff, say, like cold to the coldest extreme, but it's enough. Also, be careful with wet, because when I talk about like the cinnamon rolls inside of the cardboard packages, if those get wet, they explode out of it. I found that out camping last time. So, yeah, I do the cooler, especially if you're going to do like pre-cooking of stuff. Yeah, food safety is paramount to me. I don't want anyone getting sick, especially with the food that I cooked at an event where it may be like a long trot to get to the bathroom. So, yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
Another question. You've mentioned cooking for 20 or 30 people. How do you size up from a few to that many?
Oh, pre-cooking. So if I did have a scenario where I was cooking for, say, a bunch of people for Numenor, planning. Biggest thing is planning. Planning a menu and making sure that, I hate to say that you got a rule with the iron fist, but there is a point where you say, we're going to do things simpler. So like, we're just going to do a fajita night. So we're going to have like chicken and vegetables and beef and vegetables. And then maybe you do like keep the beef and the chicken and the veggies separate. So maybe if someone's vegetarian, they can just do their vegetables. There may be a point where you have to say like, I'm sorry, if you do have like a meat allergy or something, then we may not be able to accommodate you. And another thing with the upscaling, again, I go with the menu, the making sure that you have the right quantity, and the making sure that people pay their fair share. If you're cooking for a couple people, you might be able to split things up a little bit easier. But when you've got 30 people, again, planning ahead of time is so important, so you know how much things are going to cost, and you can divvy that up among the unit, unless the unit or realm is paying for it all, in which case, ribeye steaks all around, if you can get away with that. But yeah, scaling takes planning. So if you are cooking for 30 people, plan to make it as easy on yourself as possible and plan to scale to a menu. So I joked about pasta. I've heard that before where units are just like, hey, we're just cooking pasta. Come by and grab pasta. You have a big pot of pasta. You just make more as you need it. You have a big pot of sauce with like some good sausage in it. And then maybe just some regular old sauce and then garlic bread. Oh, it is also so easy to make garlic bread on a fire. Bring butter with you. Bring seasoning. All your extra hot dog buns can be used to make garlic bread. 10 out of 10. Love them. What else we got?
What about recipes that require a lot of chopping? How do you do that while you're out camping?
Preferably you don't. You do it ahead of time and put it all in a Ziploc bag. But if you're like me, you also bring a cutting board with you and a bunch of knives, and you do it all in like the 30 minutes prior to eating while something is already cooking. So this is another thing with prepping, is kind of knowing what you're going to have to do. So if you can start cooking your meat, which may take longer, and then move on to, say, chopping vegetables that are going to be the toppings for the fajitas or the tacos or whatever, then you have that time to do it. I've done a ton of cooking throughout my life, so it's a lot easier for me to kind of predict that timeline. But again, if you can do it all ahead of time, please do it all ahead of time. You will thank yourself for it later. I know you may think, oh, it's going to take an hour away from my sleep. I'm going to have to stay up late. But not having to chop onions on a wooden table of suspect quality, even though you did sanitize it, it's still of suspect quality, is just going to make your life so much better. What else? That's it? Anyone else?
I got another one.
All right.
I was gifted just a basic cast iron skillets. How does like open flame cooking work?
The person received a basic cast iron skillet, and they're questioning how open flame cooking works on a cast iron skillet.
All right. Very basics of open flame cooking, if you can do it, is get one of these trivets and set either your fire or whatever under it and then just cook directly on top of it. I've done it before where I have a fire going and then just lay some logs across and set it on there. But you got to keep your eye on it, and you got to make sure you have one of those gloves, because when your hand is getting that close to something hot, not only is the skillet hot, but the fire is going to be trying to roast your hand. Also, look up seasoning cast iron cookware. You need to make sure, if you don't know already, you got to keep this stuff well seasoned so that way it doesn't rust.
No soap.
Well, actually, the no soap thing is a myth. So you can use soap nowadays because it's less alkalytic and won't actually eat your metal. But it's up to you. I use a little bit of soap. That's also why I carry around that baking powder, because baking powder is really good at cooking this. But there are some good methods. I do recommend checking out James Townsend and Son. It's the 18th century cooking on YouTube. He's got a lot of good information about cooking stuff, how to take care of cast iron skillets, and cooking over an open fire. Coal Cracker Bushcraft is another good reference. And then also just Googling, cooking with cast iron over an open fire. That's my recommendation. And I think that puts me at time. So I will pass things back over to the MC.
Thank you so much for teaching and attending. You did an amazing setup. I'm deeply impressed. And I learned a lot. I hope those who attended also learned a lot. I'm going to go ahead and stop our recording and